I love it. It's harmless, but it
Okay.
keeps me amused.
Well, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And thanks for tuning in to another virtual event. And today we're delighted to have Kathy Reichs back with us. She's going to be discussing the brand new book, Fire and Bones. And we have a nice little stash of autographed copies. And I'll put a link to our web store if you'd like to purchase one. And also joining us is Hart Hanson, whose brand new book, The Seminarian. We still have a dwindling supply of signed copies left, but I'll put a link to that as well. And sorry about the phone. If you have questions for Kathy or Hart, go ahead and put them in, and Barbara usually brings me on screen towards the end of the hour, and I'd be happy to ask any of your questions. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much. This is Hart, my shot at being a producer, which you have to love. So Kathy's first novel, Deja Dead, was published in 1997, and we have more or less talked about all of her books since. In fact, we've met up in England at the Harrogate Festival. We've met up in various locations. And it's her, let me think, 20, which one is this? 23rd?
23. 23.
But in additionally, she wrote two, I think it was, not Temperance Brennan books, which I really like. So that brings you up to 25, right?
Well, there were 6 virals books, the young adult books.
Oh, sorry. That's not my focus, but you're right. They're also the young adults. Hart, on the other hand, is a mere tyro here because this is his second book. I was absolutely crazy about his first book, the name of which I now can't remember. What's it called?
The Driver.
The Driver, right. I fell in love with it, and Hart was kind enough to sign a bunch for our first mystery club back in the day. So I was really happy to see The Seminarian come. But the reason Hart is here, for those of you who might not know, is that he's the creator of, it says here, Fox TV's longest running scripted drama, Bones, based upon the Temperance Brennan novels. And so it seemed to me like he'd be the right person to talk to Kathy about how all that happened. So want to talk about that first or talk about arson in DC, Kathy? This is your show, so you
Whatever.
tell
Plus, Hart is so witty. He's very clever and he's very witty and he's funny and that's
No
another.
pressure. No pressure, Kath.
No pressure. Now be funny and witty.
Well, you guys have already done a gig together, so I figure you know what you're doing. So why don't I just be quiet and Hart, you take over?
But interrupt anytime you want, Barbara.
Okay.
Because especially if it's going badly, because you never know. We did do an event last week, and so I'm determined not to repeat too much, Kathy. So I hope that's okay with you.
That's fine. I can't really hear much of what you're saying, so I'm just going to answer. Go on.
I'm so bummed. Okay, I'm not going to try and do things.
Yeah,
I'm not going to try and do things.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would ask you, Kathy, is what question are you asked the most? And I won't ask that question.
What question am I asked the most? Why did I make the switch from being, well, two-part question. Why did I make the switch from being an academic to being a writer and then fiction writer? And then why did I make the switch to working in television?
So I'm not going to ask those questions.
Okay.
Because you've answered them enough times.
A few.
Unless there's something you want to say about that.
Not unless, no, I'm good.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure you have brilliant questions lined up.
We might circle around to it anyway. Well, Kathy, why don't you sum up what a forensic anthropologist is more efficiently than I could do it?
It's Bones. Have you heard of that? Bones?
I have heard of that show, but I heard it was wildly fantastical.
Yes, 12 seasons. Wow. We're physical anthropologists with a specialist in the human skeleton. We work for medical examiners and coroners, or maybe the military. Anyway, we help unidentified bodies get names attached to them. And we work on bodies that are not regular autopsy material. They're burned, mutilated, mummified, decomposed, dismembered, or maybe just bones. So we help the coroner, the medical examiner, figure out who it is and what happened to them.
Yeah. The first thing that I thought would make a good TV show is the two questions, if I remember correctly, that a forensic anthropologist answers first are, who is this person and what happened to them? Two things you would not know from looking at whatever mess the forensic anthropologist is looking at.
That is correct. That is mainly what, but it might also be like, how long have they been dead?
Yeah.
Or has the body been moved from one location to another location? Or what happened to the body? Was it underwater? Was it buried? Was it a shallow grave? So there can be other things as well.
What's the oldest human remains you've looked at that were the victim of a crime, as far as you could tell?
Oh, that's a hard one. I can tell you the oldest human remains I've ever handled. It was the Tong baby, Australopithecus africanus. It was one of the early hominids, and it was a 6-year-old child who died, I think they've now estimated around 3.5 million years ago in South Africa.
And what would have been the life expectancy of that person if they'd lived out a full life? 8
Oh,
years?
maybe in their 20s,
Yeah.
maybe until fairly recently, that was life expectancy for people.
Yeah. How, as a forensic anthropologist, how did you deal with the fact that you didn't get to solve every crime?
Well, you get over it. You can't expect to solve every crime. You do your best, you give them the answers. And often what happens is you don't know what, after you do your analysis and you give your report to the pathologist, and usually I'm brought into a case by a pathologist or deal with the detectives. After that, you may not even know what happens in the case. So I couldn't tell you what percentage of cases are actually resolved. And not all cases I worked on were criminal.
Right.
It could be just someone who wandered off, or there was a house fire, and well, like in this book, house fire, people in the fire, they die, and somebody has to recover them and identify them.
Yeah. Is there any chance that you became a writer of crime fiction in order to solve 100% of your cases?
Well, there is that benefit, yes. I don't know that that's why I did it, but it's awfully nice to be able to tie everything off, wrap everything up.
Yeah. I imagine you go through life with people saying, hey, Tempe Brennan can solve all her cases. Why can't you?
Exactly. I just had something come across my email or whatever it was about that. Well, Temperance would have done this. Can we actually do this in this case? And I'm like, yeah, probably not. Do you have a $1 billion budget for your lab? Yes, then we can.
And writers summing it up in 45 minutes.
Exactly.
There's two phases of your professional life that I'm sure must have shaped you as a person. I'm sure there's more than two things, but two things that must have shaped you as a writer and professionally as a forensic anthropologist. First, your time teaching at Quantico had to be an interesting time of your life. And the second was working through some of the horrible mass death scenes that you've worked through, like in Rwanda, Guatemala, and 9/11. Am I right that those things stick with you?
Well, of course they stick with me. They don't keep me up at night. I used to have dreams when you're in the middle of it, then maybe it enters your sleep patterns. But I'll never forget working through the rubble in at the Twin Towers in New York, or talking. One of my books, Grave Secrets, starts out where Tempe's talking to this old woman up on a mountain, and they're recovering some of the desaparecidos, the disappeared people. And, that actually happened. I still remember talking to this old woman who came to the grave site every day. It was a mass grave, and there were her 4 daughters and 9 grandchildren were in this grave we were excavating. So yeah, I'll never forget those kinds of experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I feel like that's the sort of thing that might drive a person to writing. If not to drink, then it may be.
Wait,
writing.
hold on. Wait, I have right here.
And is it true that you? Well, I have ice.
All right,
tea.
everybody, cheers.
We're all here. Okay, love it.
Is it true that you once examined the remains of a saint?
I did. That was a Canadian case. Speaking to Hart, who's a Canadian. Jean Lebert who died in, I think it was 1714. And then in the mid 1990s, she was proposed for sainthood. She was known as the recluse of Montreal, because when she was 18, she locked herself away and stayed in seclusion until she died at age 52. And she prayed and she, I forget, sewed. She sewed things, and there's still a lot of tapestries that hang around the province in Quebec. So for some reason, in the mid 90s, they decided to exhume the remains that were supposed to be her, and we had to get them back in the ground the same day, and just establish that in fact it was Jean Lebert. So that was a very interesting case.
Was there any sign of sainthood on the bones?
No, no. And there were all kinds of myths that her coffin had been opened up back, like, I don't know, at the turn of the century or something, and that this white glow came out. Nothing. We got none of that.
I can't help but wonder what.
But she was in remarkably good shape for having been dead at that point, 275 years or whatever it was. Yeah.
That's all it takes. That's all. Obviously a saint. I imagine it would have been, what would have happened if you had found evidence that she was the opposite of a saint? Would you have kept it to yourself, or?
That's an interesting question, Hart, because we did find some interesting things that did not jive with the profile we were looking for, but we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, I do want to move into writing and stuff. Although I just, one more thing about your entire career as both a forensic anthropologist and a writer is that when we were in Calgary, two young women came up and said that they had gone into the sciences because of your work. That's more of a comment than a question, but that must please you.
It pleases me. It worries me. I hope they get jobs. I think a lot of young people get excited about the forensic end of it and forget about the science end of it.
Yeah.
And you've got to get a degree in chemistry or anthropology or biology or something in order, and then get an advanced degree in that to be a real player in a crime lab situation. So I hope they understand that and pursue it and are successful.
Well, as a slight aside, a friend of mine who has created more than one very, very successful medical show, his daughter is a huge Bones fan and is studying to be an FBI profiler, and that show creator is not going to forgive either one of us for that.
So she'll get a degree in psychology. She'll get an advanced degree in psychology, hopefully, and yeah, and maybe criminology. I don't know.
Yeah, as he says, she's very smart and would have made a wonderful doctor. When did you first realize, or did it occur to you that, wow, I'm a successful novelist? I've made the big time.
Well, the first book, astoundingly, went right onto the New York Times bestseller list. But I thought, okay, this is a fluke, you know, and I think the whole world thought, okay, this is a fluke. It was good, but can she do it again? So I think the pressure was really on writing that second book, which did the same thing. So I think, you know, once you've had 2 or 3 books hit the top 10, you think, okay, well, maybe I can do this.
Yeah. Have you seen people reading your books in the wild?
Are they reading them in the wild?
Have you seen people that you don't know out reading your books?
I rarely see anybody reading my books. It's funny because there are millions of them out there. Yeah. And I rarely see anybody reading them, but I know they must be because
maybe they're reading them on a Kindle.
Maybe, or they're hiding the fact that they're reading them. You know, they've got them under cover.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Barbara. I meant to say some sort of tablet that is not fun to read on.
That's all right. You know what? Digital is giving way again to print now that everybody's spending their life on screens. So it's not a terrible thing to say. Yeah. And I'm sure you're right. Also, people who travel, I think, do gravitate towards digital just because, you know, I used to send suitcases in to me if I went on a cruise or something, all full of books. And that doesn't work out terribly well. So I'm fine with it.
And you can put 7,000 books on a Kindle, on a tablet device, whatever it is.
Very true. And in my case, with my kind of memory, I can't remember a single word because if I don't see it on the page, I can't recall any of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember anything anymore. I
That is not true. That is not true. She remembers everything.
wish.
Kathy, I had a teacher of mine, a writing teacher, say to me that it's when I was in my 20s. He said, it's one thing to make a living as a writer, but it's really very hard to live a writer's life. I didn't know what he was talking about at the time. I think I do now. Do you have a theory on what that means?
I don't. I think a writer's life is terrific. You have the flexibility to write wherever you have what you need, whether that's an office or just a laptop in an airport or whatever. You have that flexibility. I have two homes. I write on either end. I need a quiet room where I can close the door and, I've got a computer, but I love the flexibility. It's not like being a university professor, where I had to be up and on campus and teaching and following a schedule, etc. So I don't know what's bad about a writer's life. You're a writer.
Yeah, I suspect that what he was talking about was the huge amount of rejection that the average writer faces. You might have had less of that than other people. But I used to say when I was teaching that we get paid for the humiliation. The writing we do for free, but we get paid for the humiliation. But I thought you might have had an insight that I didn't, because your writing career looks very good from the outside.
I never got a rejection. I mean, that's true. I sent the first manuscript in just blind. I just sent it over the transom, as they used to say, and they bought it. And I stayed with that same publisher for, I don't know, 7, 8 books. Then I went over to Random House, and then I went back to Scribner. So I've never really had to submit, and that sounds terrible, but.
Have you had any terrible reading experiences where you show up in a bookstore and no one comes?
Oh, I have a big family, so there's usually somebody there, but I know what you're talking about, where they stick a table out in the mall and sit you there with your books, and you just kind of sit there twiddling your thumbs, wishing the hour would please end.
Oh, an hour.
See, there's the value of an independent bookstore. We don't do that to Kathy.
That's
I was
right.
going to make a comment too. I think Kathy is one of the most disciplined people I know. Her work ethic is tremendous. And I think maybe because of all the training and science and teaching and all, I remember at one point you were working full time, you were working on Bones, and you were writing novels and delivering them to deadline. And I was exhausted even thinking about it, Kathy. And you seemed to think it was a normal day.
Well,
So
that was a busy time. I was also doing the young adult novels, I think, with my son at that time. So yeah, that was pretty busy.
No, the only people I've seen working as hard as Kathy Reichs are literal rock stars, literal famous rock stars who are on the road all the time, writing stuff and being a public figure and playing. And Kathy's life looks very, very difficult in that respect, but she's super tough. If it's true, Kathy, that the right brain is creative and the left brain is logical, how can you get both sides of the brain?
I have no idea.
Does that
I don't know. I
seem fair
tap
to
in.
you?
I'm sorry. Well,
Does
so
that
do you.
seem
I mean,
fair?
you're a writer, and you're also, a producer, and being a showrunner has skills I can't even imagine, handling all those people and all of those different talents that those people have, and none of them are happy. I mean, I don't know how you did that.
I just ignored all the problems until they went away. I find that's what really works.
That works.
You
Yeah, I agree.
you can't do that. I just want to talk about some of the nuts and bolts of writing, and then we'll get to your book, I promise. But I know lots of people like to know some details about how writing is produced, what your system is. But the first thing that occurs to me that I'm pretty sure that sitting so much is killing me. Do you have that feeling?
Sitting, well, I just have read articles about that. If you
Yeah.
sit a lot, you're going to get, I don't know, brain cancer or something,
Yes.
or degenerative spinal arthritis or something like that. I have one of those cushions that I'm sitting on right now on my writer's chair. I bet we got the same cushion. Here we go. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Unlike you, I have to take care of my prostate too.
yeah, I don't worry about that so much.
You kind of answered this. Can you write anywhere, or do you need an environment?
I need a quiet room. I need to be able to get away and have a quiet room. I cannot write in train stations or on train. I can edit, but I can't create. I can't do creative writing when there's a lot of, my daughter does that. She writes wherever. I can't do that.
Yeah. And are your two writing rooms, or however many you have, similar?
The one at the beach house has a lovely view of the ocean. So if I look up, I have a big bay window there, and I look out and I see all my family with their little sand chairs, heading down to the beach while I'm up there at the keyboard.
Yes.
You're seeing the one behind me, which is the one in Charlotte. And they're similar in that they've got bookshelves and they've got books on the bookshelves and they've got a place for the computer and a cushion to sit on.
It's very clean. I'm just going to point out that all my stuff has been pushed aside.
Oh, yeah.
And over there.
Oh, yeah. I've got stacks on the floor here, so you can't see them.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes me feel a little bit better. PC or Mac?
Mac, absolutely. I can't imagine working on a PC.
I can't imagine working on a Mac.
There we go.
Yeah.
And yet we can still be friends.
We can still
Cowboys and
swap
farmers,
files.
right? Yeah.
Chapters in separate files or one large file?
Each chapter is a separate file. And then I keep a master file so that when I finish the chapter, I then add it to the master file. So that by the time I finish the book, I'll have 40 separate chapters, 40 separate files, one for each chapter, but then I'll have a master, which is the complete book.
Yeah. So you're basically building a pyramid.
Yeah. A very linear pyramid though.
Do you ascribe or utilize any exterior theories of writing or structures, or do you just go with your instincts? Now, for example, one of the things I was told was when writing a genre book, there has to be a major turning point every 25%, every quarter of the way, and a minor turning point every eighth of the way through.
I've read those books, but I think, I'm going to do that. And then I forget all about it. Yeah. And I just write it.
You're just using your storytelling instincts to get through your story. Yeah. And do you outline your story? Do you know who did it when you start?
No, I don't always know who did it.
Yeah.
I know what was done. I know the crime. I know the science I'm going to use to drive the solution to the crime. I know my core cast of characters, and then I know I'm going to add new characters each book. I outline maybe 6, 8, maybe 10 chapters with just like 2 sentences each. And then I just start writing. But I do a posthumous or a postmortem outline because as I finish each, oh my gosh, that looks just like my dog.
Sorry, this is not the sick one. This is the I'm not getting any attention dog because my brother is sucking it up.
Okay, no, my dog he's black and he's little and I don't know how big your dog is, but anyway, by the time I finish the book, I have a complete outline because I've added that as I finish each chapter.
Right. So you don't work out character spines or use any of the millions of theories like Theophraston character types, group dynamics, any of that to figure out, even when you're done, you don't go back and go, well, does this, and what is your relationship to theme?
To theme?
Yeah.
I kind of have a theme for each book. I'm just starting book 24, and the theme is going to be evil. What act is heinous enough to rise to the level where we would define it as truly evil? That's about it. That's about it.
But you know that before you start the book,
Yes.
you know your theme. Because I know some people write the book and then go back and figure out what they've been trying to say. So I was
Okay.
wondering which
And
one of
that's
those you were.
legit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When you go back to edit, you've taken your chapters, put it all into one thing, into one file, and you're reading it again. Are you trying to come at it with fresh eyes, or are you looking for particular things that you know you do that you might not want to do?
What I do is when I'm about a third of the way through, I print it out and I read hard copy and I edit hard copy as I go. And then and then I go and I write the next 10 or 12 chapters, and then I'll print all of that out and go through it again, just to be sure I'm not losing the gist of what I'm doing.
Yeah. It sounds like you have to read it in hard copy.
I still do like to look at it in hard copy. Yeah.
Yeah, I make huge changes in hard copy that go by me on a screen.
Yeah.
I forgive much more on a screen than I do on a piece of paper. I wonder if that's generational or personal.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're back to digital reading versus print reading. I mean, it's really kind of the same, you
You're
know.
right. You're right.
Haven't you ever noticed that, if you write something in an email and then print it out, or if it looks different, and I do that all the time when I'm doing reviewing and writing all our newsletters.
Yeah.
It's astonishing. Just
I don't
making
do that with emails, but I probably should, but I just fire them off.
I've been meaning to talk to you about your emails, Kathy.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Do you have a stance on adverbs?
Do I have a what?
A stance on adverbs.
Oh, yeah, avoid them as much as possible. Just find the right verb. Don't say he ran quickly. Say he darted or he bolted or he dashed.
Yes.
Find the right verb. Yeah, occasionally you can use adverbs, but
yeah. And do you ever get stuck?
Yeah, I get stuck. I don't so much get stuck with where the story's going. I just get stuck like I don't want to write today.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, do it anyway. Get your butt in on that cushion and do it anyway.
Yeah, it is the main thing, isn't it? Putting your ass in the chair and getting to work.
Yeah.
And do you have any, are you better in the morning or in the evening? Do you write late into the night? Are you 9 to 5?
No, I'm terrible. I write in the morning. I try to get at it, I don't know, 8:30 and stick with it for 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours. And then I'm done. I do not work well at night. I'm
only 4 to 5 hours.
Well, maybe that's being a little generous, but at least 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 4 or 5 hours at least.
Yeah.
How many hours do you write?
Well, you drew the difference between writing and editing. So if I'm writing for the first time, if I'm laying down the draft or creating it, I'm good for 2.5 to 3 hours. I can then rewrite and edit until I go to bed. But for real, I write my first draft in longhand, just to make it different from scripts. I don't do that with scripts.
Okay.
I need some things to be different, but I don't think I have 4 hours of solid creativity in me, unless, as you know, it's a television script, in which case you don't have the luxury of deciding there's a deadline and you have to get there.
Right.
I kind of wanted to, before I do that, do you have any writing rituals? Do you have to have a cup of tea and Dave Brubeck on the stereo, or?
I don't usually play music. I start in the morning, so I have my coffee sitting here. I start by going through my email, and I go through all my email, and that's kind of like sorting, sharpening pencils for me. And then when I've done that and responded to what I'm going to and ignored what I'm going to,
then you offend a bunch of people with your shoddy emails and then get to your creative work.
That's the way I do it.
If you don't listen to music, how do you drown out your family?
How do I get along with my family?
If you don't listen to music, how do you drown out your family?
My My offices are in fairly inaccessible areas, so I can close the door and it's down a hallway and off. Yeah, so they don't come in. I close the door and they don't come down that hallway and it's quiet. They're in quiet places in my homes.
Do they fear you? Does your family fear you properly? Fear and respect your work?
Yeah, I don't know if it's fear or respect or, they're just bored with me or whatever, but they know if Grancy's writing, just leave her alone.
Yeah. And you can always hold the inheritance over them.
Well, there's that. I don't know, because once you do those trust things, you can't change it.
We could talk about that for a while.
Yeah, I know, we did.
I figured we should talk a little bit about the Bones TV show that the two of us squeezed out between the two of us and about another 240 people. Did we ever do a story on Bones that you thought you could have done better in a book?
Yes. Now you're going to ask me which one, and I won't remember, but I remember thinking that's a storyline that really could have been expanded and a lot more. There was a lot more to that could have been developed, but don't ask me which ones.
Well, your reputation in our writers' room was in many ways, this always happens with you, it's the opposite of what you expect. People, the writers on Bones, found you to be generous with your ideas, non-withholding, and just throwing ideas around as though you had a number of them and sharing them with the show instead of like clinging to them for your own book. So I don't know if those two things are connected or not.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed being in the writer's room. I like the collective experience of breaking a story and, just hammering out, brainstorming ideas. That was so much fun because it's so different than a book where you're just all by yourself at the keyboard. And so I did like that. I was totally intimidated by you and by the writers. Like, this is TV. I've never written for TV. I don't know what I'll never forget what you said to me. We were sitting in your office and you said, why don't you write an episode? And I said, oh, Hart, come on. I don't know how to write an episode. Do you remember what you said? You said, well, you didn't know how to write a book either. And that worked out. So I thought, well,
your first book just hit the bestsellers list and won an award. I think you're probably going to be able, with all the help and support of that you ended up not needing a ton of course you could do it. Of course. And then I asked you to appear in the show and you said no. And do you remember what changed your mind?
Yeah, I said, that's not me. I'm not an on-camera kind of gal. I'm not doing it. And you said, David Duchovny is directing. And I said, I'm there.
And you did a great job. You had to play one of the characters' thesis advisors, Zach's thesis advisor. And Eric Milligan, the actor played Zach, said that you scared him in the scene.
We were supposed to be stern. We were told to be stern because we're his thesis committee and he's defending his thesis or his dissertation or whatever. And we're all sitting there.
I remember David Duchovny saying he thought Eric was really a very funny actor, acting so nervous, but I'm pretty sure you were scaring him.
Oh, I don't know. But I do remember David Duchovny said to me, and he said, do you ever blow a line? You haven't blown a single line. We didn't do a single retake, sorry.
The Terminator. By then you had figured out how expensive everything was, and that if you blew a line, it cost thousands of dollars. So you weren't going to have that. Which actor asked you the most questions on Bones? Which actor came to you the most often?
Emily.
Yeah,
Emily was really interested in getting it right. She really wanted to do it right. And she's such a kind, generous, wonderful, genuine person that you got to love Emily.
Yeah. She was, we say, number one on the call sheet. And that has a lot to do with how toxic or non-toxic a show can be. And Emily was a wonderful number one on the call sheet. And then she and David together as the leads were, they got along for 12 seasons. You find
Yeah.
another show where there's not
Yeah.
secret
Yeah.
angst, and
Yeah.
they didn't have that. So yeah, Fire and Bones. Let's talk a bit about Fire and Bones, which I'm sorry when I call it Ashes and Bones, which is another of your books.
Bones to Ashes is another. Number 10, I think.
Fire and Bones. Is number 24 in the works?
It is, and it's going to do with evil, this idea of what is evil, what's truly evil. And so the title is going to have evil and bones in it. Other than that, I'm not sure. So any suggestions, I'm open to, like evil bones or evil to the bone, or yeah. So I should be working on that right now, but I'll start tomorrow.
What's your deadline for getting in a draft?
My deadline is, I think, November, but we've kind of agreed that I'll turn it in after the first of the year. And then they're able to turn it around by August. I usually release in August.
And then it's on the road you go.
There we go.
Plug that book. Yeah. You are translated, I think, into 30 languages. That's a lot of success. Did that worldwide reach start with book number 1?
Yeah, book number 1 sold into a huge, because they take it to the, correct me, Barbara, is the Frankfurt Book Fair.
Mhm.
And then a lot of the foreign languages sell there, and it sold a boatload of foreign languages. Right. Right.
Actually, if I remember, didn't it publish first in the UK before the US?
I don't know about that.
I don't think it did. I think it first appeared in English anyway, in Britain and then in the US. And then the Arthur Ellis Award that I mentioned is actually a Canadian Best Novel Award. It's Arthur Ellis was the hangman. I really sort of like that the Canadians, name their, and the Australians, on the other hand, named their award after an outlaw. So
Well, and then every hangman after the first one, it was a pseudonym, I think. And then every hangman took the name in Canada, every executioner took the name Arthur Ellis. So the award's named, I have it here. It's a wooden statuette with like a rope around its neck.
oh,
A little macabre.
I know Edgar Allan Poe really can't measure up to either the hangman or the outlaw.
There you go.
There we are.
I wouldn't know. I don't have one.
Is there any part of the world where you are beloved in the way that David Hasselhoff is in Germany, or Jerry Lewis is in France? Is there somewhere where you are inordinately loved and worshipped?
I'd say the UK.
Oh, that's good.
They really appreciate me over there.
And when you go there, let me broaden this question a bit more. When you go to other countries and get asked questions about your writing and your books, does the nature of the questions change with the culture?
It does.
Can you qualify any of that? Can you say what?
I can. I know the Italians are always asking sort of like metaphysical questions and questions about the afterlife and about, religious kind of. I'll never forget, I was doing an event with Stephen King, and somebody got up and asked him this long, complicated question about Christ images, and are these Christ images and this, that, and the other. And Steve just said, I just make shit up, which I thought was a perfect answer. But yes, I think that they're different they're more pragmatic in some areas. They're more of this I don't know the word, not metaphysical. What am I trying to say?
Yeah, no, I think it is metaphysical. They're more on a spiritual level or an existential level.
Yeah.
What does crime mean to them, as opposed to, I think that would be someone should do a study on that. Like, I wonder, I try to imagine you in Oslo or Copenhagen answering what does the Scandinavian crime community ask you about your books?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever toured in Scandinavia, but it's possible I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Well, I think Hart's right that there is a sensibility, depending on what country you're in, that probably pervades the questions, as well as the kind of books you write. For example, there are almost no German authors who have been successful translated into English in the United States. There's just a different sensibility. The French do well, the Italians can do well, and then there's the whole Scandi noir thing, which, you know, Henning Mankell probably really kicked it off long after Waldo and Sjöwall. So why is it, you know, why do we want to read about Sweden and don't want to read about Germany in this country? You know, I've never quite figured it out. I mean, the Spanish have made forays, you know, not South American Spanish, but Spain Spanish. Have had a few writers, but for some reason they never really gained traction. And they tend to ask, as Hart's saying, there tend to be, you know, larger intellectual and spiritual questions at the hearts of their books. They're not just like digging down into, you know, jealousy or envy or, you know, whatever it is. So I don't know. I mean, crime fiction is basically originally primarily an English language, you know, literary format, and now it's global. I mean, August, in fact, is Women in Translation Month, which I think is absolutely wonderful that the translators are now getting so much attention. So, yeah, it's a huge subject, Hart. We can't possibly cover it.
I know it's very interesting to me, and I wonder what it would mean to a writer to discover that different cultures, different countries appreciated different things in his or her writing, and if that would have any effect on how you wrote a book.
That's another whole question. Yeah.
I was hoping you would answer it, but I understand if you don't, if you can't. There is a new character in Fire and Bones that made me think, oh, I wonder, you know, I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to say I've read every single one of your books, Kathy. I might have, but I'm positive that I am in the 20s. If I missed one or two, it would only be one or two. But I have a mind like porridge, and I'm wondering how many times you've introduced new characters and kept them. I'm talking about, in this book, it's Ivy Doyle, who is a really fun, interesting character and seemed like a very good foil for Tempe. You know, okay, she's a journalist with a past that maybe makes her slightly untrustworthy. And I was just wondering, what is the mechanism by which you decide to create a new character that could go on in several books or stop it? What is your decision process there?
As Steve said, I just make stuff up. I wanted a slightly younger character than Tempe, so she's a friend of Tempe's daughter, but she's older than the daughter, so she kind of slots in between the two of them. She has the potential for being developed, I think. She's a journalist, which is an area, you know, I didn't want to do another forensic scientist. If I want to take this character further, I thought a telejournalist would be a good avenue to do that.
Well, something I really enjoyed about it was the to and fro. Ivy could be a very good source of information for Tempe.
Yes, exactly.
Tempe could be a very good source of information for Ivy, but Tempe's very careful about what she can and cannot say. And it was a nice feeling of tension there in that relationship that was, I thought it brought a whole dimension to the book. And I was wondering if you were thinking of, this is not a question you have to answer, of course, but if you were thinking of doing more stories in Washington, D.C., which is, of course, where Bones was. This is your first book set in D.C., and it's, of course, where Bones, the television show, was set. And she seemed like such a careful creation. That's the wrong word. A mindful creation that I thought maybe you had plans.
Well, I might. Yeah, I might. And I like the setting, the Washington, D.C. I went to school there. I graduated from American University as an undergrad, and my daughter lives there. Two of my grandkids live there. So I know the district very well. My part-time job as an undergrad was giving guided tours. There used to be these tour mobiles that would go around the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, the Jefferson Memorial, and I would be the person, giving the tour on those. It's a fun job. And if we got stuck in traffic, you had to keep talking. So I constantly was reading books about all these bizarre little trivia facts about Washington, how many suicides from the top of the Washington Monument, and that just weird little things that I could throw out there.
And somewhere in there, you developed what seems to be a fascination with the Foggy Bottom neighborhood.
I just love the name of that neighborhood, Foggy Bottom. I wanted to call the book The Foggy Bottom Bones, and my publisher said, nope, we're not doing that. Yeah, Foggy Bottom, it's near Georgetown, and there was the Foggy Bottom Gang, was a real group of brothers who controlled, back in Prohibition days in the 30s and 40s into the 50s, actually, illegal booze production and distribution and bootlegging and then gambling. And so I thought that would make we think of Al Capone in Chicago, but who thinks of that in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
So I thought that would be some interesting historical background.
Yeah. I am very careful about spoilers in something, but I think it's all right to say that an important clue in this book is burlap bags.
Who knew there
Yeah.
was a whole world of burlap bag people? There are people that collect burlap bags. There are historians who focus on burlap bag. Who knew? I called a guy at a burlap bag factory here in North Carolina, ended up talking to him for the longest time because burlap bags.
What came first? The knowledge of burlap bags or the research? Did you know burlap bags were so fascinating, such a good clue when you put it in, or did you then have to research burlap bags?
Yeah, I chose burlap bags and I thought, well, I'm going to look into this. I might switch it to, I don't know, something else, plastic. No, it couldn't be plastic, but anyway, but once I talked to this guy and then did some research online about burlap bags, I said, oh yeah, we're going with the burlap bags.
Yeah.
You learn more than you ever wanted to know about burlap bags.
I could smell that burlap bag.
Good.
It was, again, careful to avoid spoilers. Was that story based on any reality? Let me call it the Foggy Bottom story.
Well, the whole history of the neighborhood, Foggy Bottom, and the bootlegging and all that was real.
Yeah.
The body found in this old house, the story starts with a fire, fire and bones. That's not a big surprise. And Tempe ends up in this sub cellar that's not on any of the plans. And then she finds this additional victim that's not supposed to have been, and nobody knows who this is and why is she down there and why is she in a burlap bag. So
so for this to work, it needs to be an old house that has multiple layers. But what I was surprised and hadn't really thought about is illegal Airbnbs without any exit. When you check into a hotel or whatever, if they're of any quality, they have maps about, if there's a fire, go here, don't take the elevator, do all this. And I thought, how terrible it would be if you were living in a place that literally was a box that you just could not get out of. And, if there was a fire.
That was based on a real situation. There was a fire, it was an illegal Airbnb, and yeah.
Well, I mean, usually I've read all your books, so I'm fairly good at figuring out which things are real and which stuff, as you say, you've made up or how it all works. We do need to ask Hart about his book, but I would like to ask you a question, Hart, it occurred to me while we were talking about bones and all. Is the long form television something, where you can do an entire book and stretch it out over however many episodes you want, 6, 8, or 12 or something? Would you go back and do one of Kathy's books in a long form television format?
Oh, yeah.
Because they're so complex, that I think they actually lend themselves to a much longer development.
Yeah, it's the state of the industry right now is such that that streamers, platforms, broadcasters, whatever you call that group of people, are looking for shows like Bones that are episodic. A story is, I think I can say the Seminarian has been optioned by Sony, Sony Studios. And all indications are, it's very early days, and all indications are that they want, so Sony is a studio that sells to everybody and doesn't have their own network or streamer. They sell to everybody. And the market, which is in dire straits right now, is asking for episodic shows like Bones, like the old network model. So
Right.
if Kathy and I were to decide, oh, we should do a book as a Fargo length, it would be a tough sell right now. But you know, everything changes in 6 months.
It does.
But
Tell us a bit about the seminarian before we go to questions from the audience.
the Seminarian is my book. I feel bad pitching it in front of Kathy.
No, please.
Kathy's
It's
a
a
generous
form-
person. She'll be fine if you do it.
It's really should be called the former seminarian. It's someone who lost his faith right on the cusp of taking holy orders, becoming a Roman Catholic priest, and becomes a legal investigator instead. And he's been doing it for about 10 years when a hit is put out on him. So he's trying to figure out why somebody put a hit out on him. His sidekick's girlfriend, who is an escort, has gone missing, and a boy shows up on his step saying, "I'm your son," a 12-year-old boy. So my guy, the seminarian, Xavier Priestley, is juggling all those as he tries to stay alive and figure out what's going on in his life. My books are, I'm going to say, goofier than Kathy's. I don't think anyone's going to have nightmares from my books that sometimes they would get from Kathy's books.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting, you know, you coming from being a showrunner and being experienced in all this, this is another whole conversation, but how that shapes you and, you know, brought you to be a writer and how that shapes you. So
It's a great book, by the way. I really enjoyed
yeah,
it.
no, me too. That's why we have signed copies. I had to hunt him down.
Kathy is very, very supportive of my efforts to write books.
Right. So Kathy, are you still going to TikTok back and forth between Canada and me? One of the things about this book that it really made me realize how tough it would be to be in a romantic relationship with somebody like Tempe, but conversely, somebody like Ryan. So, you know, they've obviously made it work because they're both law enforcement professionals. They haven't killed each other yet. And I never thought that you were really going to attach her to anybody. I mean, for many books, you know, it was never going to sort of turn into any kind of a long-term relationship. But to be fair to him, do you need to go back to Canada occasionally, or is he going to spend his time in the US?
They're going to go back and forth. And who knows if it'll work? I don't know. They don't know.
Right.
They're giving it a shot.
Well, I've always loved the Canadian. I think part of the fun for American readers is, you know, the times that we get to spend in Canada with you. You know, for neighbors, I don't know that we are all that familiar with going back and forth. So there we are. My conclusion, having spent a week in Quebec last year, is the Canadians are the nicest people I know. If you even put a foot in the street, they stop. If you go into restaurants or hotels, they're thrilled to see you. If you go into a dress shop, you know, honestly, I just, if the weather were better, I would relocate to Quebec in a heartbeat. I really would. But
they're Canadian, you know, they're nice.
They really are. It's amazing. Patrick, come and join us and see if we have any questions from the audience while I'm rhapsodizing about Canadians.
Well, it's funny because I saw a great bumper sticker that had the Canadian flag on it, and it said, "Canada, just like America, but better." I thought that was pretty amusing.
Also true.
Yeah, there are some great questions that have come in. For Kathy especially. When are we going to see your memoir, Kathy?
Mm-mm.
No?
Yeah, I'm not going to I'm too private a person. I don't think I'll do that.
Yeah.
I can't stop other people if they but then I can deny that any of it's true.
Plausible deniability. It's a great concept.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'd read that book. I'd read that book. I think you
I
should do a
would too.
memoir.
No.
Barbara Butcher, the death investigator in New York, had a really interesting memoir. Did you happen to see that one, Kathy?
I don't think so.
Yeah, really, really interesting book.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's another really great question. When it comes to forensic anthropology, across cultures, is there such a thing as a worldwide best practices, or does it vary around the globe?
Yeah, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, there's a section in there, the anthropology section, and they have certainly put out best practices, protocols. Whether or not those are adhered to worldwide, who knows? But yes, such a thing exists.
Okay. And then another question is, have you ever dealt with taboos and such around death in any of your investigations?
You have to be sensitive to certain religious attitudes towards death. And at the lab in Montreal where I worked, we were always as accommodating as possible to that. I can remember autopsies where we had, Orthodox Jews standing around with the whole, the hat and the whole thing observing, and we allowed them to do that. And I think we had to collect every single drop of bodily fluid.
Wow.
To be given to so yeah, there was an attempt made to accommodate that kind of thing.
Interesting. Let's see here. What else do we have? Well, a couple people are getting in the weeds about the lack of German crime fiction and
Okay.
what that might.
That's not Barbara.
Yeah,
That was me. Sorry.
that's a tricky one to really get into. There is an awful lot of it that's just not translated. Isn't that right, Barbara?
I really don't know. All I know is that I have, over the course of 35 years, spoken to maybe 5 German, authors who are German, who write about Germany or
Right.
are translated in here. And at the Frankfurt Book Fair, one is unsurprisingly meets quite a few German authors. And I tried 1 or 2 and got no response for American readers when we brought in their books. So, I'm not in any way anti-German. I just, it just doesn't seem to work in the same way that the French or the Italian. The French seem to have and the Scandinavians seem to have the largest American audiences.
Right. We have a German member to the discussion group I do at the store, and we're trying to get her to suggest a German crime writer. And it's been a challenge, to find somebody who's in print and so forth. Let's see, on to other questions. Let me just switch over to YouTube. Okay. Let's see. Just a lot of people, Kathy, saying how much they love your work. I'm trying to look for some really specific questions. I do have some title suggestions.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
And actually, one of them is really good. Evil to the Bone.
Okay,
That's pretty good.
not bad.
Yeah. That's the best
I don't know
one.
if I use that. Am I going to get sued?
There's no copyright on titles.
Okay.
Evil to the Bone. Yeah.
I think you're thinking of Bad to the Bone, Kathy, by
Yeah.
George Thorogood.
Okay, there you go.
Bad to the bone. Very good. That's true.
Renee says, Barbara, do you speak German?
I studied it at one point in one of my graduate degrees, and I never could quite work out declensions. But I had the same problem with Russian. My mind seems to work more in the romance language vein than it does in the other. It's just the way it's just how your mind works. You can't. It's hard to change it.
Okay, here's a good question, which is, Kathy, are most of your books informed by specific cases that you've worked, or are they kind of hybrid of various different cases?
Both.
Both.
Some, like Deja Dead, the first one, is based very much on a specific case I worked. Most of them are hybrids, where I'm always drawing on experience that I had and bringing in different things and mixing, because they usually have more than one storyline going. So the second one has the exhumation of the saint storyline that we talked about. We talked about that, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And then there's a modern day as well. So
Gotcha. Evil Bone Deep is another suggestion that's come in. And then Hart, what are you working on now? Do you have another book in the works?
I just sent a book called The Venice Flats, around the Venice Flat Earth chapter, the missing president of the Venice Flat Earth chapter that my agent has in her hands right now. And then I've got a TV development that things that will never die and take up a lot of time. As I said, the seminarian's been optioned. The driver is, I think the driver's dead at Netflix.
Oh,
but
no,
never,
really?
things don't get killed. They just don't,
Don't
they
thrive.
just hover. They
Yep,
just
they
hover.
don't thrive.
And as I said, right now the industry is pretty. It's a bit of a standstill. Everything's moving very slowly. And I have a series that I co-created with the director Lee Daniels at FX that we're waiting to hear about.
I think that is really about it for questions.
Right. Well, Kathy, I see that you are, although I have some trouble, are you actually going between Charlotte, North Carolina and Charleston, South Carolina, as it says on the book?
yes,
So your beach house is the one in South Carolina?
yes.
Got it. Okay. Are you spending any time in Canada now?
Some, not as much as I was while I've pretty much retired from doing forensic work.
Okay.
So I was going up every 6 weeks I was up there, but I'm
Right.
not doing it that often anymore. But I still get up there every couple months.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you both very much for a fabulous hour. No surprise, I knew it would be. So thank you all for watching. Hart, thank you for your wonderful questions and for spending time with us and figuring out your microphone. Yay. And Kathy, always a pleasure. And thank you for going to all the trouble to sign books, which is hard to do at home. But
Okay, the hardest part was just lugging those boxes. I was at my beach house all by myself, hauling them in and
I know.
taking them back up and taping them.
I wish I could send a person.
I was too.
Your publisher hasn't quite reached the point where they're willing to send a book concierge, which is what we do.
Yeah,
But then again, maybe you could just come see us again.
that would be good.
Would be great. We could actually do that in September and report all the pre-sales. You don't actually have to come in August when no one in their right mind would actually want to be here.
Arizona in August is lovely, though.
No, but I'm living in hope that Kathy will come back and see us. We had a fabulous rum cake party was that your 10th book? I think it was.
Gosh, I don't know.
Yeah, right. And anyway, we've had lots of time with Kathy at the store, and I would like to have her back when we could work it out. So thanks very much, everybody. Good night. Thanks for joining
Thank you.